welcome back to whispers in the dark. Dim the lights, settle in somewhere safe, and let your imagination do the rest. This is the story of Hazel, and of the night she woke up with blood on her hands and no memory of how it got there. Now let's begin. I woke to the sound of dripping. Not rain, not a tap exactly. Something thicker, slow, heavy, wet. Each drop struck the tiled floor with a tiny, obscene pat that seemed far too loud in the silence. For a few seconds, I did not know where I was. My vision came back in fragments, as if someone were lifting black cloth from my eyes an inch at a time. Light glared white above me from a fluorescent strip fixed into the ceiling. It flickered every few heartbeats and filled the room with a sickly humming buzz. The smell reached me next. Bleach, stale urine, cheap floral air freshener, something metallic, something rotten and hot and intimate. Blood. I was standing. That realization came before anything else. My knees were locked. My shoulders were stiff. My right arm hung slightly away from my body, trembling with effort. My left hand felt numb, as though I had been clenching it for hours. Then I looked down. A knife was in my hand. It was not a kitchen knife. It was one of those long, serrated steak knives you see wrapped in paper napkins beside restaurant plates. Only this one looked too large, too dark, too alive. Blood coated the blade all the way to the hilt. It had begun to dry in places, turning from bright wet red to a deeper crusted brown. But fresh blood still slid down the grooves and gathered at the guard before running over my knuckles. The handle was slick. My fingers had tightened around it so hard they ached. My breath caught. There was blood on my bare wrists. Blood speckled the front of my blouse. Blood soaked both knees of my pale skirt. Blood had dried beneath my nails in dark crescents, as if I had clawed at something soft. And at my feet, bent at an angle no living body could hold, lay a woman. I think some terrible animal part of my mind understood what I was seeing before the rest of me allowed it in. The human mind is merciful that way. It does not always let horror arrive all at once. It breaks it into pieces so you can drown slowly instead of all in one instant. Her body was crumpled between the sinks and the farthest toilet stall, as though she had tried to crawl somewhere private to die. One leg was folded under her. The other stretched stiffly across the tiles. The heel of her shoe snapped off, and lying several inches away in a little fan of blood. Her cream-colored blazer had been slashed open down the front. Beneath it, her blouse was soaked through. There were wounds everywhere, too many to count. The fabric of her chest looked shredded. The skin beneath had opened in ragged, dark mouths that glistened wetly beneath the glare of the lights. One side of her neck had been cut so deeply I could see a pale flash inside the wound beneath all that red. Something tendon white and ghastly, like strings in butchered meat. Her face was turned toward me. I will never forget her face. Her eyes were open, not wide with theatrical surprise like in films, just open, empty, glassy, the whites veined pink. Her mouth hung apart as if she had been about to say something final and had never finished. Blood had leaked from between her lips and dried in a branching pattern down her chin. Someone had scratched or carved lines into her forehead. At first, they looked random. Then my vision sharpened, and I saw they were not random at all. Curved cuts and intersecting strokes etched into the flesh between her brows and down the bridge of her nose in a deliberate pattern. There were more marks visible at her collarbone where the torn blouse fell aside. Symbols, shapes. I stared at them without understanding. Then I heard myself make a noise. It was small at first, a breath through clenched teeth. Then it became a whimper. Then a gasp. Then a full-body animal sound, high and thin and shuddering. The knife slipped in my hand. I almost dropped it onto her. I stumbled backward and hit the row of sinks. The porcelain edge drove into my lower back, pinning me there. My reflection jumped in the mirror. For 1 second, I thought some other girl was trapped in there with me. Some terrified waitress or stranger, covered in blood, staring wild-eyed from the glass. Then I recognized my own face. Hazel, 23, brown hair, though now it hung half out of its clip and stuck in damp ropes to my cheeks. Green eyes I usually liked because they made me look less plain, now swollen and rimmed red as if I had been crying for hours. Skin too pale under the fluorescent light. Blood spattered across my mouth in tiny freckles. One dark smear along my jaw like a lover's handprint. I looked insane. I looked guilty. I looked possessed. My stomach heaved so hard I folded over. The knife clanged from my hand into the sink basin. I vomited into the porcelain, choking on acid, tears bursting from my eyes. Strings of spit hung from my lips. My body shook violently with each retch until there was nothing left, and I was just dry, heaving over the blood-streaked sink, while that dead woman lay behind me, cooling on the floor. This is not real, I thought. This is not real. I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to remember how I had gotten there. Nothing. No, not nothing. Pieces. Broken pieces sliding in the dark. The restaurant. Warm amber lights. Laughter. Glasses clinking. A birthday dinner maybe. No, not mine. Someone across the room had been singing. I remembered the smell of garlic butter and wine and grilled meat. I remembered staring at condensation running down a water glass because I was waiting for someone. Who? My mind snagged and tore. There had been a text on my phone. I remembered reading it while sitting at the table near the back. A message from an unknown number maybe, or maybe from someone I knew. The words would not settle. They slid away each time I reached for them. Then a pressure. A sudden pressure behind my eyes. A ringing in my ears. The room tilting. A sensation that all the voices around me had gone far away, muffled as if I were underwater. Had I stood up? Had someone called my name? Hazel. Yes, someone had said it. Close to my ear. Not gentle, not loud, intimate. Hazel. A fresh wave of terror cracked through me. I turned so fast I nearly slipped. The bathroom was empty except for me and the body. 3 stalls, one with the door hanging crooked, white tiles stained beige with age, a cracked mirror, a baby changing table bolted to the wall with a faded sticker no one read, no hidden figure, no witness, nothing. But my skin prickled with the certainty that I had not been alone. The fluorescent light buzzed again. The humming deepened for a moment into something almost like a whispering choir. I slapped both palms over my ears. Think, someone could come in at any second. A server, a customer, a little girl with her mother. Someone would open the door and scream and see me standing there over a corpse. I spun toward the sink where the knife lay in a smear of blood. I did not want to touch it again. The sight of it made my lungs lock, but leaving it there with my prints all over it felt impossible. Every crime show I had ever half watched while folding laundry seemed to roar through my head. Evidence, DNA, footprints, cameras, witnesses. I snatched a wad of paper towels from the dispenser, wrapped them around the handle, and lifted the knife. My hand shook so badly, the blade clicked against the ceramic. I looked around stupidly for somewhere to put it. The bin under the hand dryer was lined with a black plastic bag already full of tissues and paper towels. I opened my fingers. The knife dropped in with a muffled, wet thud. For a second, I just stared at the trash, as if it might spit the weapon back out. Then I looked at the body again, and realized with a new level of horror that the floor around her was covered in footprints. Some were hers perhaps, dragged and smeared through blood. But some were mine. I could see the narrow pattern of my flats stamped red across the white tile, a trail from the entrance, around the sinks, back toward the body. I looked down at my shoes. The leather was slick and glossy with blood along the soles and toes. My throat closed. I had moved around her. I had stood over her. Maybe I had knelt. Had I watched her die? Had she begged me to stop? No memory came. Only a sudden flash so vivid it made me sway. Not a memory, perhaps. More like an image forced into my skull. A circle drawn in something black and glistening. Candles burning with low blue flames. A woman's chest opening under a descending blade. My own hands pressing down. A voice, not heard but felt, speaking from inside my bones. Open her. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. The vision vanished. No, I whispered. My own voice sounded wrong in the room. Too small, too young. I crouched, careful not to touch the dead woman, and snatched more paper towels. I wiped uselessly at my shoes, smearing the blood wider. The paper disintegrated. I threw it away. My hands were so slippery and panicked that nothing made sense. I wanted to scrub the room spotless. I wanted to disappear into the drain. I wanted my mother. I wanted to wake up. The dead woman's hand twitched. I screamed. The sound tore out of me before I could stop it. I stumbled back, hit the stall door, and it banged loudly against its frame. The woman's hand lay still. I forced myself to look. There was no movement, only the slight settling of flesh, perhaps, or my own hysterical imagination. But her fingers were curled in such a way that the nails pressed into the tile, as though in the last second of her life she had tried to claw a message into the floor. A noise came faintly through the bathroom door. Laughter from the restaurant. Dishes clattering. The normal world continued on the other side of that cheap painted wood while I stood in hell. I needed to leave. Not cleverly, not strategically, just leave. I turned on the tap full blast and shoved my hands under the water. Pink ran down the basin in streaming ribbons. I pumped soap until it frothed thick and white, scrubbing my fingers, wrists, palms, under my nails. The scent of artificial rose almost made me vomit again. Blood had dried in the tiny lines of my skin. I scrubbed until my hands burned. I splashed my face. Red diluted and spread in the sink like watercolor. I used paper towels to blot my blouse and skirt, but the stains only spread into rusty clouds. Up close, anyone would notice. From a distance, maybe, it would just look like spilled wine. I checked my reflection once more and nearly broke. There was blood in my hairline. I wiped it away. Something dark was visible just under the collar of my blouse. I tugged the neckline aside. On the skin just above my left breast, someone had drawn a symbol in what looked like dried blood. A circle intersected by 3 hooked lines, like antlers bent inward. At its center was a tiny slit, vertical and dark, disturbingly like a closed eye. I recoiled so hard my shoulder cracked into the mirror. No, I rubbed at it frantically with wet paper towels. It smeared, but did not vanish. The lines had sunk into my skin. Not ink, not paint. Cuts, fine shallow cuts, expertly sliced, already clotting at the edges. I had been marked. A coldness moved through me then that had nothing to do with panic and everything to do with dread. Something deeper than the fear of being caught. Something old and enormous and hungry, opening one lidless eye beneath the skin of the world. I remembered being a little girl in my grandmother's house, sitting on a braided rug while rain hammered the windows. Gran had smelled of mothballs and lavender and would only tell her strangest stories after dark. Stories of old villages in the woods, of saints who were not saints, of mothers who hid salt above the doors. She came from the north, where cliffs fell into Black Sea, and churches stood older than memory. She had once gripped my chin in her papery hand and said, very seriously, "There are things that do not come through doors, Hazel. They come through people." At 7 years old, I had laughed. Standing in that bathroom with blood drying on my skin, I heard her voice, as clear as if she were whispering behind me. They come through people. The door handle rattled. I stopped breathing. Someone outside jiggled it once, then again harder. I had not even realized the bathroom door was locked. Had I locked it? The metal handle clicked and trembled. Then silence. The footsteps receded. I nearly collapsed with relief. My brain lurched back into motion. I hurried to the door and unlocked it. I opened it a crack, peered into the narrow corridor beyond. Empty. The restaurant music drifted faintly down the hall. A framed print of lemons in a bowl hung crooked on the opposite wall. Normal. God, everything looked so offensively normal. I closed the door again, but only until it nearly latched. I could not risk someone struggling with a lock. I grabbed my handbag from the counter and froze. I had no memory of setting it there. My phone was inside. So were my keys, wallet, lipstick, the little packet of ibuprofen I always carried. Proof that I had walked in here like any other woman fixing her makeup before returning to dinner. I looked once more at the dead woman. Her blazer pocket bulged slightly. Something rectangular. Her phone, perhaps. A part of me wanted to go through it. Another part wanted never to touch her again. I took one step closer despite myself, crouched, and saw that the bulge was not a phone, but a folded square of black card protruding from the torn pocket. My fingers hovered. Do not touch anything, I thought, but I was already beyond that. Beyond clean lines. Beyond innocence. Beyond the illusion that if I just behaved correctly, the universe would spare me. Using a fresh paper towel, I pinched the corner and slid the card free. On one side was a symbol embossed in dull silver. The same hooked circle cut into my chest. On the other side, written in neat hand with red ink it read, "The vessel wakes at supper." I stared until the letters blurred. Then I stuffed the card into my bag and ran. The corridor outside the bathrooms opened into the rear of the restaurant. A host stand stood near the entrance. Servers in black shirts threaded between tables, carrying steaming plates and cocktails with orange peels. Candlelight glowed on polished glasses. A birthday cake with sparklers moved through the dining room, while 3 waiters clapped along to a song everyone had heard too many times. The smell of food hit me so hard it turned my stomach. I kept my head down and walked, not too fast, not too slow. My legs wanted to sprint. My face I tried to keep arranged into something vaguely embarrassed, as if perhaps I had spilled Merlot on myself and only wanted to reach my car before anyone noticed. No one stopped me. That was the first miracle. The second was that the table where I had apparently been sitting was empty. A half-full water glass. A cloth napkin fallen to the floor. My handbag I already had. No companion waiting, no date calling my name. Only a single menu closed beside the plate. I had been alone. I almost kept going. Almost fled into the parking lot with nothing more. But something on the table snagged my eye. A receipt holder lay open beside the water glass. Tucked inside was a folded slip of paper, not printed like a bill. Handwritten, my name on the outside. Hazel, my blood ran colder. I slid into the chair for the briefest moment, opened the note beneath the table. You said yes. That was all. No signature. My mouth went dry. I turned the paper over. Blank. I crumpled it in my fist and stood again. At the host stand a teenage boy with too much gel in his hair, smiled automatically at me. Have a good night. I think I smiled back. I remember the doors parting. Cool night air striking my face. The parking lot silvered with recent rain. My own reflection faint in the restaurant windows as I hurried away, stained and wild, and trying not to look behind me. I found my car in the far corner beneath a dead security light. My hands shook so badly I dropped my keys twice. Once inside, I locked the doors, crouched over the steering wheel, and let out a choked sob that seemed to come from somewhere below my ribs. I could still smell blood on myself despite the soap. My chest hurt where the symbol had been carved. I pulled the blouse away from my skin and looked again. The mark seemed darker now, the fine cuts red at the edges as though freshly opened. My phone buzzed. I screamed and nearly threw it. Unknown number. A new text. Drive home. Do not look in the mirror. Every muscle in my body locked. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then another message arrived. The first gate has opened. My thumb hovered over the keypad. I almost typed, "Who is this?" I almost called the police right then and there. But what would I say? Hello. I woke up over a butchered woman in a restaurant bathroom, and now someone is texting me about gates. Please come arrest me. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat as though it had burned me. I looked toward the restaurant entrance. People still came and went. No alarms, no screaming. No one had found her yet. The thought of driving home felt impossible. The thought of sitting there waiting felt worse. I started the engine. The entire drive, I fought the urge to glance into the rearview mirror. The text had embedded itself in me like a splinter. Do not look in the mirror. At first, I told myself I would not because I did not want to see my own face. Then another thought came. What if I looked and saw someone sitting in the back seat? My apartment was 20 minutes away across town. The roads were slick and reflected every street lamp in long, distorted bars of gold. Wipers thudded steadily across the windscreen, though only a fine mist fell now. I kept my eyes rigidly forward. Every red light lasted too long. Every passing car seemed to linger at my window. At one junction, I thought I heard whispering from the back seat and nearly crashed. It was only the radio, only static. I had no memory of turning it on. I slapped it off with a shaking hand. In that fraction of a second before the sound died, I thought I heard voices speaking under the hiss. Many voices layered together in a language that felt older than language, rising and falling around one repeated word. Hazel. When I reached my apartment building, I parked crooked across two spaces and did not care. Rain had begun again, cold, needling rain that dampened my hair in seconds as I ran from the lot to the entrance. The lobby smelled of wet carpet and someone's burned toast. Mrs. Groves from number 7 was getting her post. She smiled at me vaguely and kept sorting envelopes. If she noticed the stains on my clothes, she did not show it. Inside my flat, I locked the door, then the chain, then dragged a chair under the handle, even though the door opened outward and the chair would do nothing. My one-bedroom apartment had never felt smaller. The yellow lamplight was too soft, too domestic. My mug from that morning still sat in the sink. A cardigan hung over the sofa arm. A paperback lay face down on the coffee table where I had abandoned it the night before. All the ordinary evidence of my harmless life pressed in around me until I wanted to scream. I went straight to the bathroom. I do not know why. Maybe because horror seeks its reflection. Maybe because some part of me needed to confront the fact of my body in bright light. I flipped on the bathroom lamp and looked at myself in the mirror again. For one impossible heartbeat, I saw not my own reflection, but the dead woman standing behind me. Her throat hung open. Her eyes were milked over. Symbols covered her face in carved loops and hooks. Blood ran down her blazer in glossy black sheets. I spun around so violently, I struck the towel rack. No one was there. When I looked back at the mirror, only I remained. Pale, soaking wet from rain, bloodstained, breathing like prey. I ripped my clothes off and stuffed them into a bin bag, then another. I told myself I was preserving them for the police. I knew even then that was a lie. I wanted them gone. I wanted every fiber that had touched that room burned to cinder. Under the shower, hot water needled my skin. Pink spiraled around the drain. I scrubbed until my shoulders and chest went raw. The symbol above my breast refused to vanish. Clean now of blood, I could see the precision of it. Each line had been incised with awful care, as if by someone who revered the shape. The slit at the center had swollen slightly. I leaned close to the steamed mirror afterward and parted my lips. My tongue felt sore. I stuck it out. Another symbol had been cut beneath it. Small, hidden. I gagged. No memory. Still no memory. Only flashes now, growing worse each time they came. A dark room lined with hanging black cloth. Candles made from yellow tallow. The smell of old pennies and sweet rot. A chorus breathing in time. My hands lifted, not mine and mine. A voice entering me like smoke. A woman kneeling. The descent of the blade. The ecstasy of warm spilling blood over my fingers. I slammed both hands against the sink until the vision broke. By midnight, the police had found the body. I know because my phone would not stop vibrating. At first, it was unknown numbers, then local news alerts, then messages from Ellie. Ellie was my best friend and the only person who could call me at 1 a.m. to ask if I was awake, and then keep talking even after I said no. We had met in 6th form, both too awkward to join any existing friendship circles, and too stubborn to admit we were lonely. She worked nights now at a care home and had the supernatural ability to smell drama across town. Her first text said, "Are you up? Something awful happened at Bellwether." Bellwether, the restaurant. The room tilted. Before I could decide whether not answering would be suspicious, she called. I let it ring out once, twice, then answered. "Haze, oh thank God, you are awake. Are you home?" I sat on the edge of my bed in clean pajamas, staring at the black bag of bloody clothes shoved into my wardrobe. "Yeah, you sound weird." I was asleep. "No, you were not," she paused. "Are you crying?" I swallowed. What happened? At Bellwether, some woman was murdered in the toilets, like not robbed or anything, actually butchered. It is all over the local pages already because somebody posted video of the police cars outside. My manager's niece works there, and she said there was blood everywhere. My fingers dug into my knees so hard they hurt. Ellie kept talking, words spilling faster with excitement and fear. They think it happened while the restaurant was full. Can you imagine? Just having dessert while some poor woman is getting hacked to pieces 10 feet away. God, sorry. That was awful. I just wondered if you were out tonight because you mentioned maybe going somewhere after work. I closed my eyes. There it was, a chance. Simple, say no. Say I stayed in. Say I have no idea. I came home early, I heard myself say. It was not exactly a lie. Good, thank God. This city is getting creepy as hell. They said she had weird marks carved into her, like symbols. There are photos going around, but I did not open them because people are disgusting. My mouth filled with saliva. I thought I might vomit again. Hazel, I am here. You sure you are okay? Yes. There was silence. Ellie knew me too well. She could hear when I was folding in on myself. Did something happen? I nearly told her. The urge rose so strongly it burned. Ellie, I woke up there. Ellie, I think I killed her. Ellie, there is something inside me. But the words would not leave my mouth. Not because I did not trust her. Because the instant I imagined saying them aloud, I felt another presence in the room. Watching, listening, the air by my bedroom door seemed to deepen. Shadows gathering in the corner where no shadow should be. My skin crawled. I am just tired, I said. All right, Ellie said slowly. Call me tomorrow, properly. I mean it. I will. When the call ended, I sat in silence. Then I made the mistake of opening the news. The headline was bland in the way headlines always are when they cannot bear the truth. Woman found dead in restaurant bathroom. Police investigate suspicious circumstances. The article used words like severe injuries and active inquiries, and members of the public asked to come forward. But the image attached showed enough. Blue flashing lights outside Bellwether. Officers in white forensic suits. A woman from the next shop holding a hand over her mouth. I scrolled lower. An update had already been added. Sources close to the investigation described unusual markings on the victim's body. Police would neither confirm nor deny suggestions of occult involvement. Occult involvement. I laughed then. A short, broken bark of sound. Because what else do you do when the most insane explanation in the world is somehow the least insane available to you? At the bottom of the article was a grainy photo taken by someone through the restaurant window. You could not see the body, only the rear corridor leading toward the toilets, and at the edge of the frame, caught in a reflection on the glass, a figure standing inside, a young woman with dark, wet hair, blood on her blouse. My face was too blurred to be certain, but I knew. I dropped the phone. It hit the rug with a dull bounce. I stared at it as if it were a severed organ. Then a new notification lit the screen. Video attachment received. Unknown number. My hands felt numb when I picked it up. I should not have opened it. I knew that, with every sane nerve left in me. I opened it anyway. The video lasted 11 seconds. It showed me seated alone at my table in Bellwether from an angle above and behind, as if filmed from a corner of the ceiling. There was no sound. Time stamp on the bottom right. 8:14 p.m. I watched myself lift my water glass, pause halfway to my lips. My head turned slowly to my left, though no one stood there. Then I smiled. Not my smile, never my smile. My mouth stretched too wide, too serene, the expression of someone seeing a beloved face after years apart. I placed the glass down with exaggerated care. I rose from the table. My posture changed as I stood, straightening in a way that made me seem taller, almost elegant. I walked toward the back corridor. Halfway there, I turned and looked directly up at the camera. Even blurred, I could see my eyes. They were black. The video ended. I dropped the phone again and screamed until my voice shredded. After that, the night became a series of broken hours. I called the police once and hung up before speaking. I searched the symbol on the card, on my chest, in frantic phrases that made no sense. Hooked circle occult mark. Demonic sigil antler's eye. Vessel wakes at supper. Most results were nonsense. Amateur forums, tattoo pages, fantasy art. Then, buried in old scans of a local history archive, I found a reference. Not exact, but close enough that my stomach turned. An account from 1871 describing a splinter sect operating on the outskirts of the county. No official name, referred to by villagers as the supper wives or the red table, accused of conducting secret rites in which a chosen woman became the mouth of the guest. Bodies found marked with inward hooks representing open gates. Victims carved and arranged for communion. The chosen woman often claimed no memory afterward. If the rite succeeded, further deaths followed within 7 nights. If the vessel was destroyed before the 3rd gate, the line ended. Destroyed. I read that line again and again. Around 3 in the morning, I fell asleep despite myself, curled on top of the blankets with all the lights on. I dreamed of a dining room longer than a church nave. The table stretched so far I could not see the end. Figures sat on either side in black clothing, heads bowed, hands folded. Their faces were hidden by veils made of skin thin enough to show the shifting shapes beneath. At the center of the table sat a thing I cannot describe without lying. Every word I know is too human for it. It was antlered and eyeless and wet. It breathed through many mouths. Its ribs opened and closed like fingers. A plate was set before me. On it lay a human heart, still beating. "Eat," said the thing. When I woke, dawn light seeped gray around the curtains, and my tongue hurt. In the bathroom mirror, I found blood on my teeth and a bite mark on the inside of my cheek, so deep it was almost through. I went to work anyway. That is perhaps the most insane part of this story. Not the blood, not the symbols, not the visions. The fact that I still thought I could keep living inside normal routine. I worked in the stock room of a boutique homeware shop on Market Street. Candles, linen throws, ceramic bowls with ridiculous price tags. My manager, Priya, raised one eyebrow when I arrived looking half dead and said I could stay in the back away from customers. I stacked boxes with trembling hands and tried not to think. Tried not to hear whispers in the rustle of packing paper. Tried not to notice that every clock I passed seemed to stop for 1 second when I looked at it. At lunch, Ellie came by. She was not meant to. She worked nights and should have been asleep. But Ellie had always moved toward disaster instead of away from it. She pushed through the stock room door with 2 coffees and 1 look at my face. Oh my God. I stood too fast, knocking over a box of glass candle holders that shattered across the floor. "Haze, what happened?" I think she knew the answer before I spoke. Not the details, but that some line had been crossed. "There is something wrong with me," I said. Then it all came out. Not neatly, not bravely. In gasps and half sentences and long staring silences, while Ellie listened with both hands around her coffee, going paler and paler. I told her about waking in the bathroom, the body, the knife, the texts, the symbol carved into my skin, the video of my black eyes, the old archive about the red table. She did not call me crazy. She did not recoil. She said only, "Show me." So I showed her the mark. Her face changed. "What?" I whispered. She pulled down the collar of her own shirt. Just below her right clavicle was a faded scar I had never seen before, small and white and old. 3 hooked lines inside a circle. My blood turned to ice. "No," she said before I could speak. "Not the same. Similar. My gran had this old pendant with a mark like it. She said it was for warding. We used to joke she was a witch. Hazel, I think my gran knew things. That evening, we drove to the care home where her grandmother lived. Mara Quinn was 90 and looked carved from driftwood. Her hair was a cloud of thin white pinned back from a face lined like dried riverbeds. Cataracts had milked one eye, but the other remained dark and sharp enough to skin a person. Ellie had always described her as difficult. In truth, she felt ancient in a way that had nothing to do with years. The moment she saw me, her fingers tightened around the blanket over her lap. "Oh dear," she said. Not hello, not who is this, oh dear. Ellie locked the room door. I showed the mark. Mara closed her good eye for a long time. "They found you," she murmured. "Who?" "The feeders at the red place. The ones who lay tables for what should not hunger." Every hair on my body stood up. Mara spoke in a voice so low we had to lean close. She knew the old stories. Not stories, she corrected us. Warnings. Once in a generation, a vessel was prepared through invitation, mark, and offering. The chosen woman need not remember consenting. Consent could be stolen in dream, in bloodline, in grief. She told me some families were watched for years because certain people were easier to open, easier to hollow. Lonely people, sleepwalkers, those who had lost someone and never closed the wound. I thought of my mother's death 2 winters earlier. The endless ache she left. The hollow in me I kept papering over with work and wine and distraction. Mara's eye fixed on mine. "Did something take interest in you after the funeral?" My mouth went dry. I remembered suddenly standing alone by my mother's grave after everyone else had left. Snow beginning to fall. The ground raw and dark. I had been crying so hard I could not see. And behind me, from among the trees, I had heard a voice say, with immense tenderness, "I can return what was taken." I had thought grief had imagined it. "Yes," I whispered. Mara nodded, as though some final proof had fallen into place. It entered by invitation of sorrow. The ritual at the restaurant was only the waking. Now it will want more. How do I stop it? My voice cracked. "Please." She looked at Ellie, then back to me. "There are old ways, dangerous ways. If 3 gates open, the vessel is consumed and the guest walks in flesh. Before that, it can be cut loose." "Cut how?" Mara's gaze dropped to the mark on my chest. "By numbing what rides you and feeding it back its own beginning." This meant nothing to me. It seemed to mean something to Mara. She sent Ellie to fetch her handbag from the wardrobe. Inside were prayer cards, mints, 2 tiny bottles of perfume, and wrapped in a yellowing handkerchief, a pendant on a black cord. Tarnished silver. The hooked circle, but split by a vertical line like a sword through an eye. "A lock mark," she said, "worn by women who stood watch." She pressed it into my palm. Her skin was shockingly cold. "Tonight it will call you. You must not answer. What if I do? Then the second gate opens." I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, because by then I was so deep in madness that phrases like second gate had begun to sound like weather forecasts. Mara caught my hand before I pulled away. "It wants blood, Hazel, but more than blood, it wants witness. It wants you to see and agree. That is how it roots. Remember that. It cannot stay where it is not welcomed." I wanted to say it had already stayed. It had already worn my skin like a glove and split a woman open in a restaurant bathroom. But Mara was tired. Her face had gone gray. The nurse was knocking. We left with the pendant and a page torn from an old prayer book covered in cramped notes about ash, salt, and names never spoken aloud. That night it called, not by phone at first, by dream. I woke standing barefoot in my kitchen, the apartment dark around me, the fridge door open and cold air spilling over my legs. In my right hand, I held a carving knife from the drawer. In my left was one of my houseplants uprooted from its pot, soil scattered across the tiles like grave dirt. The leaves had been shredded into ribbons. Black sap dripped from the stems. My chest burned. The mark there was bleeding. 3 small beads of blood welled from the central slit and ran down my skin. The pendant hung hot against my throat. I had put it on before bed despite feeling ridiculous. Now it pulsed faintly, as if against a heartbeat not my own. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I stared. It rang again. I answered. At first, there was only breathing. Deep, wet, as though the caller possessed lungs full of fluid. Then a voice, my own voice, speaking from the other end, in a tone of absolute calm. Hazel opened the door. I looked toward the flat door. Something stood on the other side. I knew it with total certainty, though I could hear nothing. No footsteps in the corridor. No scrape, just the weight of attention pressing through wood. "Who are you?" I whispered. The voice on the line laughed softly. A second voice joined it. Then a third. Then many. All my voice. We are what answered. The kitchen light exploded above me. Glass rained over the counters. I screamed and dropped the phone. In the instant before the screen went black, I saw a reflection in it. Not my kitchen. A long table, candles, figures seated waiting. And at the head of the table, the dead woman from Bellwether. She raised one hand slowly to her throat, and with 2 fingers peeled her skin open wider, like wet paper. The pendant at my throat seared. The call cut out. On my front door, from the inside, 3 lines began to appear, not scratched by any visible hand, just surfacing in the painted wood, cutting themselves inch by inch. Hooked lines curving inward around an invisible circle. I threw salt at them because I had no better idea. White grains hit the door. The carving stopped. There was a long silence. Then from the corridor came a sound like someone smiling, with too many teeth pressed against the wood. After that, I did not stay alone. Ellie came over with a duffel bag, 2 kitchen knives, a torch, and enough panic, disguised as determination, to keep both of us moving. We taped Mara's torn prayer page to the wall. We poured salt across the windowsills and doorframe. We burned sage because Ellie insisted all horror films mocked the characters, who did not at least try. The flat smelled like a church caught fire. At 2:17 a.m., the television turned on by itself. Static first, then local news. The presenter's smile was too bright, her voice too smooth as she delivered the overnight update. Police had identified the victim from Bellwether as Dr. Marion Vale, age 42, lecturer in comparative religion at the university. She had reportedly spent years researching apotropaic cult practices in coastal Britain. Friends described her as brilliant and secretive. Police were exploring whether her death was linked to her academic work. Then came the part that stopped my heart. Authorities have also confirmed that surveillance footage shows another woman entering the bathroom corridor shortly before the incident. They have not identified her publicly, but are asking her to come forward as a witness. A still image appeared beside the presenter. May, blurry mid-step, head turned. Witness, for now. Ellie muted the television. We go to the police. No, she wheeled on me. Hazel, no one will believe this. And if they put me in a cell, and whatever this is comes back, what then? Her jaw worked. She knew I was right, or at least not wrong. The screen flickered, though muted. The presenter was gone. In her place was a close shot of the Bellwether bathroom floor. Blood white tile, a woman's shoe lying on its side. Then the camera tilted slowly upward, though no camera should have been there. The dead woman filled the screen, eyes open, throat ruined. She spoke without moving her mouth. Second gate. The television went black. Ellie backed into the wall so hard the framed print behind her fell. I think that was the moment she truly believed me. By sunrise, we had a plan, if desperate improvisation can be called that. Dr. Marion Vale had studied this. Her office might contain notes. Names. The beginning Mara had mentioned. Something we could use. Police would likely seal it soon if they had not already. So we went before the city fully woke. The university humanities building smelled of dust and wet stone. Saturday meant deserted halls. Marion's office door on the third floor was closed, but not locked. Perhaps security had not yet been notified. Perhaps something wanted us there. Inside, books covered every surface. Folklore, ritual studies, demonology, medieval theology. Papers stacked in careful drifts. A dried rowan branch over the window. A small brass bowl full of ash. The room felt less like an office than a watch post. On the wall opposite the desk hung a corkboard crammed with photos, maps, symbols, and notes connected by black thread. At the center was my face, not a recent photo. One from years ago, lifted from somewhere online perhaps. Me at university graduation, laughing into wind, cap askew. Around it were other women, dozens, most with red X marks over their images, some newspaper clippings, missing persons, unsolved attacks. One article from 11 years earlier about a bride who stabbed her groom during the reception, claiming afterward that she had seen the guest at the table. Another about a nurse who drowned 3 infants and then tore out her own tongue. Ellie made a sound, like someone choking. Papers on the desk gave the rest. Marion had been hunting the red table for years. Not as believer at first, but as skeptic following. A pattern of ritualized killings clustered around old roots and ruined chapels. She traced bloodlines, invitation structures, repeating imagery of feasts, mouths, and inward hooks. Her later notes grew frantic, handwriting more compressed. She no longer wrote like an academic. She wrote like prey mapping the predator that had finally turned to look back. One phrase appeared again and again. The guest cannot create. It can only enter what is opened for it. Another, the vessel must be named before the rite, but the guest must not. And finally, in red ink so dark it might have been blood, if found marked, seek the root table. The first invitation was carved beneath the chapel at Ash Thorn Fold. Burn the ledger. Speak the hunger back to the stone. Ash Thorn Fold was 20 miles north, near the coast. A ruined chapel I knew only by rumor, half swallowed by bramble on private land. Marion had sketched a map. A key lay taped beneath it. We did not discuss whether we were really going. Discussion belonged to other lives. The drive north was all low clouds and stripped hedgerows and fields shining with rain. The world looked washed of color. My phone kept vibrating in my coat pocket, but I did not check. With every mile, the mark on my chest throbbed harder. By the time we turned onto the overgrown farm track indicated on Marion's map, I could barely breathe through the pain. Ash Thorn Fold stood on a rise above the sea, its chapel roof long collapsed, stones black with lichen. Wind moved through the empty windows and made a sound almost like chanting. Behind the chapel, half hidden by thorn scrub, a squat outbuilding leaned into the earth. The key fit its rusted padlock. Inside smelled of mold, wax, and old graves. Steps descended below ground. Ellie squeezed my hand once. If this turns into the kind of place where we hear children singing, I am leaving you. I almost smiled. Then we went down. The crypt was larger than it should have been. Low ceiling, walls weeping damp. Niches cut into the stone held rows of candles, some new enough that wax still smelled sweet. A table stood at the center. Not wooden, stone, its surface grooved with channels darkened by centuries of use. Above it, on the far wall, was carved the same hooked circle, larger than a person, its central slit opening downward over the table like a lidless eye about to drink. On shelves along one side sat ledgers bound in black leather, and in the nearest corner, nailed to the wall by her wrists, was Dr. Marion Vale, or what was left of her. Ellie screamed. Marion's body sagged forward, feet not touching the ground. Her abdomen had been opened from sternum to pelvis in a clean vertical seam. The cavity inside was empty, except for loops of something black and fibrous clinging to the ribs. Not organs, roots perhaps. Her face had been skinned from the eyebrows to the upper lip, exposing glistening muscle and teeth frozen in a rictus grin. Symbols covered her remaining skin in carved rows. One eye had been removed. In the socket burned a candle. The smell hit a second later. Rot blood, hot tallow, sea salt. Human waste released in death. Sweet decay. I dropped to my knees and retched. On the stone table lay a ledger open to a page, headed in elegant handwriting. Inventory of invitations. Names listed underneath. Dates, notes. Hazel buy-in. Observed after maternal burial. Receptive. Grief aperture stable. My vision tunneled. I was a line item. A livestock note. A vessel. Below in a different hand. Recent and rushed. Marion Vale. Interference expected. Offer as witness. Ellie grabbed the ledger so hard the binding cracked. We burn it. Yes, but before we could move, footsteps sounded above. Slow, measured, many. A whispering drifted down the stairwell. Not voices exactly, but breath shaping itself around the edges of words. Hazel. Ellie looked at me. In her eyes, I saw the same terror that must have filled mine. I snatched the box of matches from beside the candles. Ellie tore pages from the ledger with both hands. The paper was thicker than it should have been, almost fleshy, and made a stringy sound as it ripped. I struck one match. It failed. Another flared. The whispering grew louder. Figures appeared at the top of the stairs. 3 women, all ages. One in a waitress uniform from Bellwether. One elderly. One perhaps 16 in a school blazer. Their faces were wrong, not mutilated, just emptied. Eyes black. Mouths slightly open. Blood ran from each nose in thin lines. They came down together like sleepwalkers. Behind them, others gathered in the doorway above. Shadows packed shoulder to shoulder. I dropped the match onto the torn pages. Flame licked up bright and hungry. The women shrieked, not in pain, in fury. The sound split the crypt wide open inside my skull. I clapped my hands over my ears and still heard it. The symbols on the walls seemed to writhe. Candles guttered blue. The mark on my chest tore open. I felt it physically, a splitting heat. I screamed and fell against the table. Blood soaked through my shirt. And then it was there. Not fully, not incarnate, but present. The air thickened into shape over the stone slab. A towering distortion like heat above asphalt, except blacker than black, and ribbed with glimpses of wet bone. Antler forms unfurled and withdrew. Mouths opened in places no head existed. The whispering became a chorus from inside my teeth. You invited me. No, you begged. I did not. In grief, in hunger, in the little room where death sat with you and would not leave. Images slammed through me. My mother in hospice, yellow and wasted. Me alone afterward, curled on the kitchen floor, sobbing that I would do anything for one more minute. Anything. Anything. The presence swelled, pleased. It had never needed a ceremonial yes. It had needed only the soul deep consent of despair. Ellie was shouting my name, but she sounded very far away. The black-eyed women lunged toward us. One caught Ellie by the hair. Another seized my wrist and with terrible gentleness tried to guide my hand toward the stone table where a knife now lay waiting. Not from anywhere I had seen. Simply there. "Third gate," whispered the mouths in the dark. I saw then what was required. Not another stranger, not a victim brought for witness. Me, my full willing sight, my hand lifting the blade and sealing the flesh. Agreement. Mara's words returned through the roar. It wants witness. It wants you to see and agree. And another, feed it back its own beginning. Beginning, the first invitation, the root table. My eyes snapped to the carved symbol on the wall. The huge inward hooked circle. At its center, nearly invisible beneath soot and old blood, was older stonework. A name cut in Latin characters so worn it could not be read from a distance. I tore free with strength born of terror and grabbed a fallen candle from Marion's body. Wax burned my hand. I staggered to the wall. The black-eyed women clawed at me. Ellie tackled one of them. The room dissolved into shrieking and smoke. I held the candle close to the worn carving and read aloud the name, hidden beneath centuries of filth. Not a demon's grand title, something simpler, smaller, meaner. Gaston. The effect was immediate. Every candle in the crypt blew out. The dark presence convulsed. All the whispering mouths howled in one childishly furious voice. The great shape over the table collapsed inward, folding like a tent with its poles cut. The women dropped where they stood. Blood burst from their ears. The symbol on my chest went white hot, then cold. Again, Ellie screamed from the floor, so I screamed it back at the stone. Gaston. The wall cracked. A line split straight through the carved eye. Dust rained. From somewhere deep beneath us came a sound like a cavern inhaling after centuries of suffocation. The grooves in the stone table began to smoke. Flames shot from the burning ledger, racing across pages and up the shelves. Heat slammed into us. I do not remember leaving clearly. Only fragments. Ellie dragging me toward the stairs. One of the black-eyed women grabbing my ankle and then going limp. The nailed corpse of Marion finally tearing free from the wall as the stone around her gave way. The roar of fire in a place that should not have burned so fast. We burst from the crypt into hard daylight, just as the ground behind the chapel shuddered. The outbuilding collapsed inward with a thunderous crack, stones swallowing the stairwell. Flame belched once through the rubble and then vanished, leaving only smoke and the stink of scorched meat. The sea below the cliff looked black as oil. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Ellie said, in a voice raw from screaming, "We are still calling the police. Just maybe not with the full version. That was 3 months ago. 3 months since the crypt collapsed. 3 months since Ellie and I stood on that cliff above the Black Sea. shaking in the wind, and pretending that if we never spoke the full truth aloud, maybe the truth would loosen its grip on us. It did not. The police came before the week was over, not with sirens, not with shouting, not with the dramatic violence people imagine when they think of arrest. Just a hard knock at my flat door at 7 in the morning, while the sky outside was still colorless and wet. I knew what it was the moment I opened it. 2 detectives stood in the corridor. Behind them, a uniformed officer. Their faces were carefully blank in the way professionals make them when they are already certain of the thing they have come to say. They had found the knife. Of course they had. The cleaners at Bellwether had not emptied the bathroom bin before the police sealed the room. The steak knife had been recovered, wrapped in soaked paper towels, my fingerprints preserved beneath the blood. The victim's blood was on my clothes. My DNA was under her fingernails. My footprints matched the prints on the bathroom floor. CCTV showed me entering the corridor and never showed anyone else going in before the estimated time of death. And the clothes I had hidden in my wardrobe, the ones I had told myself I was preserving for the police, only finished what the rest of the evidence had already started. I was not a witness. I was not even a suspect anymore. I was simply the woman who had done it. I remember Ellie arriving at the station half an hour later with her hair still unbrushed and her jumper on inside out. I remember the way her face crumpled when she saw me through the glass. I remember trying to smile at her and failing. I told them everything. That is the part I still return to when I cannot sleep, which is often. The fact that I told them everything, not the careful version, not the frightened half-truth, everything. I told them about waking in the bathroom with blood on my hands and no memory in my head. I told them about the carved symbol on my chest. I told them about the black card in Marion Vale's pocket, about the texts from unknown numbers, about the video of my eyes turned black, about Ellie's grandmother and the old stories and the pendant, about Marion's office and my photograph pinned among the others, about Ash Thorn Fold, about the crypt, about the ledger, about the women with empty faces and the thing that spoke through many mouths, about the name carved behind the soot, about the wall cracking open when I screamed it aloud. I told them until my throat was raw and my vision blurred. And one of the detectives finally leaned back in his chair and gave me a look I will never forget. Not fear, not belief, pity. That was worse. They asked whether I had ever experienced hallucinations before. They asked whether mental illness ran in my family. They asked whether I had been under stress after my mother's death. They asked whether Ellie was encouraging my delusions. They asked whether grief, guilt, and shock might have caused me to construct an elaborate story around an act I could not emotionally accept. I kept telling them no, kept telling them they had to listen, kept telling them that just because it sounded insane did not mean it was not true. But when they brought Ellie in, and she repeated the same story with that pale, stubborn terror in her face, it only made things worse. Two frightened young women describing demons and rituals and gates in the earth. To them, it was not corroboration. It was contagion. There was an evaluation, then another, then words like acute stress response and dissociative episode. And trauma-induced psychosis started appearing in rooms where people no longer looked directly at me. My solicitor advised me to stop talking about the ritual. The police advised me to cooperate. The psychiatrists advised me to rest. I wanted to tear the walls open with my hands. In the end, the court never had to decide whether I was a murderer in the ordinary sense. They had the evidence. They had the blood. They had my hands on the knife, my DNA in the room, my clothing soaked with what I had done. But they also had me sitting beneath fluorescent lights, talking about dead lecturers, nailed to crypt walls and things that come through grief. They had hospital notes full of nightmares, fugue states, carved symbols, and voices on the telephone that no one else heard. So they called me unwell, unfit, dangerous to myself, possibly dangerous to others. And I was transferred here. The hospital is not what films make it look like. There are no iron bars, no screaming from every room, no orderlies dragging people down corridors while thunder crashes outside. It is cleaner than that, softer, which somehow makes it worse. The walls are painted in calming colors that never quite calm anyone. The doors lock with quiet clicks instead of slams. The windows only open a few inches. The nurses speak gently even when they are watching your hands to make sure you do not pick at your skin. At breakfast, we get lukewarm tea in thick plastic cups and toast that tastes of nothing. There is a courtyard with a dead-looking tree in the center and white benches bolted to the ground. Sometimes the other patients walk in slow circles around it, as if orbiting something only they can see. My room has a bed, a desk, a chair, and a mirror made of polished metal that bends my reflection at the edges. They took the pendant from me when I arrived. Personal effects, they said. Safety policy. Ellie is trying to get it returned, but every week there is a new form, a new delay, a new person apologizing without helping. So I write instead. That is what they tell us to do. Journal our thoughts. Externalize the spirals. Give shape to fear, and it becomes manageable. The psychiatrist says this story is my mind's way of placing architecture around trauma. The nurse with the pink nails says writing is healthy, whether the memories are factual or symbolic. The consultant with the expensive watch says my fixation on supernatural explanations is a defense mechanism against unbearable guilt. Maybe they are right. Maybe I blacked out and slaughtered Marion Vale in a restaurant bathroom all by myself. Maybe there was no crypt, no ledger, no thing with mouths inside the dark. Maybe grief cracked me open so completely that madness poured in and wore the shape of folklore, because that was easier than facing what lived in my own hands. Maybe. But then there are the details. The cut on my chest, healed into the exact shape of the mark. Ellie still has scratches on her arms from hands she insists belonged to women who later could not be found. Ash Thorn Fold exists, though the police say the outbuilding was only an old storage room that collapsed in a fire long ago, and that no bodies were recovered from beneath it. Mara Quinn died 2 weeks after my arrest, and before she went, she told Ellie to salt my doorstep if I ever came home. And sometimes, late at night, when the ward has gone quiet, and the sedatives have turned everyone else to soft breathing shapes beneath their blankets, I hear a sound from the corridor outside my room. Not footsteps, not voices, something gentler, a wet, patient dragging, like the hem of a soaked dress moving slowly over linoleum. The first time I heard it, I pressed my face to the narrow window in my door and saw nothing. The second time, I looked lower. There, in the strip of light beneath the door, a shadow paused. Not the shape of feet, the shape of antlers. I did not scream. I have learned not to scream in here. Screaming gets your medication increased. So I sat very still until dawn and told myself it was the branch of the courtyard tree moving outside the window. Only my room does not face the courtyard. Ellie still visits me every Thursday. She signs in at the desk, empties her pockets into the tray, lets them check her bag, and comes through the double doors trying to look brighter than she feels. She always brings me something small, a chocolate bar if the ward allows it, a magazine, clean socks. Once she brought me a notebook with moons on the cover and said, with false cheer, for your inevitable best-selling memoir. She is thinner than she used to be. The shadows under her eyes are darker, but she still comes. That matters more than I can explain. We sit in the visitor's room with its cheerful paintings and its smell of disinfectant and stale coffee. And for 45 minutes, we pretend to be two ordinary women talking about ordinary things. Her work, the weather. Which nurse is the least unbearable? Whether the hydrangeas outside will survive the season. Sometimes we even laugh. Then the laughter fades. Then one of us mentions the old things. Not directly at first. A question, have you been sleeping? Any more messages? Any dreams? And the room changes. Last Thursday, Ellie reached across the plastic table and took my hand. Her skin was cold. I went back, she whispered. My whole body went still. Where? She did not answer at once. She did not need to. Ash Thorn Fold, she said finally. A nurse passed the open doorway. Ellie waited until the footsteps faded. There is nothing there now but rubble and weeds, she said. But Hazel, someone had left flowers. Flowers, she nodded. Dead white lilies, tied with black ribbon. My mouth went dry. Neither of us spoke for a long time before visiting hours ended. Ellie slipped something into my palm beneath the table. Small metal warm from her skin. The pendant. I looked up so sharply, the chair legs scraped. How did you get this? She gave me the ghost of a smile. You are not the only one who knows how to keep things when people tell you not to. After she left, I hid it inside the hem of my pillowcase. I sleep with it there now, or I try to sleep. Tonight the ward is quiet. Rain ticks against the narrow window. Somewhere down the hall, a patient is murmuring through a dream. The nurse on observation has soft shoes and a cough she tries to smother politely into her sleeve. And I am writing this, writing it all down exactly as I remember it, because if I do not, I am afraid the hospital will sand the edges off it. They will medicate the horror into something clinical. They will file it into a folder and call it processed, resolved, integrated. But some things are not resolved. Some things wait. Maybe that is all this is in the end. The account of a killer who could not bear her own mind and built a cathedral of terror to house her guilt. Or maybe I am telling the truth. Maybe I am sitting in a locked psychiatric ward because the story I told was too impossible to survive in the clean, bright language of police reports and courtrooms. Maybe the thing that wore me once is still out there, patient as rot, moving along the edges of grief, listening for the next cracked open soul to whisper that fatal little prayer into the dark. Anything, I would do anything. If you are hearing this, then perhaps these pages left this place somehow. Perhaps Ellie carried them out in her bag under the nurses' noses. Perhaps someone found them after. Perhaps you are sitting where I once sat, in a dim room with your own private sorrow breathing beside you. If so, listen carefully. If something answers when you are at your weakest, do not answer back. If a voice speaks kindly from the dark and offers to return what death has taken, do not believe it. And if you ever hear a soft dragging outside your bedroom door in the small hours of the morning, do not look at the gap beneath it. No matter how gently it knocks, that is where I will end this. Not because the story is over, because I can hear it now. Something is in the corridor. The nurses have stopped moving. The rain has stopped. And under my door, thin as a cut in paper, a shadow is growing. Ellie visits again on Thursday. If I am still here, I will ask her to take these pages. If I am not, then you already know enough. Some things do not come through doors. They come through people. And some doors, once opened, never close again. Sleep well, and if you can, do not grieve alone. Good night.
Whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close in this moment so